Yay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is Jersey Collective Reads, which is our monthly book club featuring books either about or set in New Jersey in some way. And then we do a virtual event with the author. So this month we have Jane Wong with us, who's we're going to talk to her about her memoir, Meet Me Tonight in Atlantic City. I'm Kerri Sullivan. I am the founder of Jersey Collective, and also a librarian and the editor of the book New Jersey Fan Club. And Courtney, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Preiss. My debut novel, Welcome Home, Caroline Klein, is coming out on April 16th, 2024. It is set in good old Monmouth County. Um, I'm also a Jersey book girl. So thrilled to be here. So excited to talk about Jane's memoir. And just really grateful that you were able to make time for us. Jane, if you want to do an intro to yourself as well.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Courtney. Excited for your book. Congratulations. Books are, they take a long time to write, so what a feat. I am so excited. I'm actually calling in from Bellingham, which I know at least one person here knows very well. But I'll be in Jersey in I think less than a week actually. So I'll be home soon. But I'm so excited and thank you for, shouting out and reading the memoir because it's super vulnerable, obviously, to write a memoir. I totally could have maybe turned it into fiction, which is like, I think a lot of people mention that, like they kind of like it starts off as a memoir, but it gets too intense and people turn it into fiction because it's like maybe just to like protect myself. So yeah, just excited and yeah, I definitely feel kind of like this is a huge chunk of my heart. And the good news too is that it's going to be out in paperback in April. So
Oh,
uh,
nice. Congrats.
that's
That's great.
yeah, that's really exciting news for me because it's like it gets to have like another life as well. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome. It's funny you mentioned a lot of people fictionalize,
Mhm.
start writing a memoir and then maybe decide like this is too vulnerable and too personal and like I don't want to put myself
Mhm.
out there like this because one of the questions that I had written down was like you write poetry, you've written fiction, you write in all different genres, so like why did you decide to tell these stories through memoir?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge lover of poetry. And I feel very much kind of like no matter what, I'll always be writing a poem. That said, I feel like, in many ways, poetry is sometimes a bit like nonfiction. Like it is, not that all the speakers never always, the poet themselves, but I felt like for some reason, like some of these stories in here needed just space. I mean, I couldn't necessarily in a poem, I think like write about, for instance, Atlantic City and gambling and my father and like, what that meant for, immigrant low income communities in a single poem. Like it just didn't, that seems like a lot to ask. So I think like essays allow for more sprawl. And I think I took some experiments too. So sometimes I think the prose feels very poetic or very hybrid. So I think I just needed to do it. And it was one of those things where I was scared to do it. I'm not gonna lie. I think it was poetry is my comfort zone. It's what I teach, as Catherine knows. Like I don't usually teach prose really that much. And so it's like I almost had to like learn to write in a different genre too. So but it's all the same, I'll be honest. Writing is writing and it's still an expression. I make things too, like I do ceramics and it's all making, it's still that creative energy, but yeah, it definitely was a stepping outside of my comfort zone for sure.
I want to come back to the ceramics later.
Okay.
I'm like saying this so I remember, because honestly, every part of that answer has introduced like a bunch of different threads and segues to all of the questions I want to ask you. So I'm trying to just settle on one. I think that I know that Kerri had mentioned this. I think in the initial Jersey Collective Reads newsletter, that she's a huge fan of memoir, right? That like, I think that that's your favorite genre. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Kerri, but I'm also like, I think that memoir is my favorite genre as well. And in reading this, I feel like it sort of unlocked this thing that I knew, but like wasn't like consciously seeking, which is this like subgenre of memoirs written by poets.
Yeah.
And I'm just, and Kerri, like, I think that you had alluded to that too, in sort of your description of
Yeah,
your experience reading. Like, there's just
definitely.
something, yeah, there's something just like really special about that. And I tried to just like off top, like think of a couple of other favorite memoirs of mine that I'd read in the last few years that were also written by poets. And Lucy Greeley's autobiography of a face came to mind. Saeed Jones's How We
Yeah.
Fight for Our Lives. And I was just curious if you had any that you really love. Like, I feel like this is now going to be a more active pursuit for me because this is exactly the kind of book that I'm drawn to. And you just did such a beautiful job. So curious, like anything in that subgenre or anything else that you feel like is kind of in conversation with this book.
Yeah, I love Saeed's work at both as a poet and a nonfiction writer and as a podcast host too. So many I feel like I've been very drawn to people who do just like multi-genre, multidisciplinary work. Joy Harjo, also our poet laureate, also has a wonderful memoir out as well. Yeah, there's so many, it's so funny because like I actually hilariously, as I was writing this book, I wanted to like I wanted to write in my mind, at least it didn't work out this way. I wanted to write like nonfiction. Like I was like trying to read books not by poets, funny enough, just to try to, because I know myself well enough that I'll just get lost sometimes in the lyricism. And I was trying so hard to like, write with a bit more bluntness or kind of like narrative clarity. But I just found myself going back, like it was like a balancing act. I was trying to like create like scene work and like propulsive narrative, but also at the same time, I would fall into these moments of just like basically poetry or like for me, it's very sensory. Like I think maybe the major kind of turn or difference by poets who write memoirs is that it's so visceral or so sensory and kind of weirdly philosophical. I feel like there's moments where I'm just like, whoa, like I stay there and I'm like, whoa, what does this mean? That sometimes feels like a poem to me. Like when you leave a poem, you have to reread it again, that kind of feeling. But yeah, there's so many. I'm trying to even, oh my gosh, I'm sure there's a bunch coming out too. Safia Sinclair has a book coming out soon. Um, um, I know this is always happens to me where I like lose track of like titles. I'm just like, what happened to my brain in terms of reading?
Yeah, I hear. I don't mean to put you on the spot. Literally, anytime anyone
That's how I
asks
am
me
too.
for any kind of like book title on the spot, I'm just like my mind goes blank as a tissue. So no pressure.
Well, if you have anything afterwards that you want to shout out, you can email them to me and I can throw them in our YouTube. We call them show notes.
Show notes. I like to pretend we're a
I
pod.
love
Yeah.
that.
I was going to ask about a little bit more about that balance, actually, because you did an amazing job of striking this balance between the macro and the micro, also between the kind of like poetic lyricism and the like deeper cultural commentary. And I was wondering, for you, like when you're drafting, do you feel like you're leaning one more into the other? Does the balance come while you're drafting, or do you find that it's something that comes afterward in the editing process?
That's a great question. I'm for better or for worse, a type of person who compartmentalizes, mostly so that I don't kind of spiral out into like pure mayhem. And so like when I'm writing, for instance, like the title chapter "Meet Me Tonight in Atlantic City," which has research in it in terms of like, gambling addiction amongst Asian American communities, but also is a story about my father, obviously, and his kind of like abandonment of our family. And it's also about Atlantic City also. So there's that part, like, and also in the history of Atlantic City and, you know, where it is currently today. And it was so special, I think, to end my summer book tour in Atlantic City. That was like really important to me for that to happen. But it's also like a lyric or like poetic, I guess, journey in terms of like being a kid and like my mom in there. So there's like a lot of different uh you know, even describing the boardwalk and like researching the boardwalk, I basically did everything in pieces. Like I just like when I'm writing, I will just do the research parts. I'll write those parts and like leave blank spots, and then I'll come back and then I'll add like the scene work of like, you know, the deep emotional scene work between like, you know, the scene where my father is like passed out from gambling all night. And then there are the hermit crabs that my mom buys us from the boardwalk, and they're crawling on his back. Like that's kind of moving into poetry. Like that's an image, right? And it was real, it happened, but like, you know, there's a part of being a poet that is like you're taking something that is maybe an image that, you know, you remember so vivid to you, but you have to give it some sort of other metaphorical power, right? And it turns into manifest destiny, or this kind of like these hermit crabs are trying to say like, you know, my dad is now like where they live, which is funny. So I think I just did every piece by piece. And I did that through the whole book because I don't think I couldn't have just like naturally moved from poetry to research. Like it doesn't, I can't write forward that way. So I wrote a lot in pieces and like just was putting it together basically. But yeah, I just, and some of the facts that you read, it's like I didn't know that the boardwalk was actually like they took it down like in the winter, you know. It was fascinating to learn that it wasn't up the whole time when it was like, you know, in the early days. Or that it was like in many ways like due to the fact that there was too much sands like in the trains that were going back and forth when it was Atlantic City was like this vacation spot. And yeah, honestly, the hardest part though about writing a memoir is that life keeps living, obviously, and like I feel like there's like more. Do you know what I mean? It's like, especially when I visited Atlantic City just recently in June, like, and I like my mom and I hadn't been in Atlantic City for like 20 plus years, and we, you know, we stayed in a casino. And I mean, there's more to that chapter because like my mom literally, she's so funny. She was like, let's gamble. And I was like, what? Are you serious? Like, this is the thing that upended our lives and we've never gambled ever, neither of us. And she was like, let's do it. We're here. We have to rewrite the story. She actually said that. I mean, can you make this stuff up? I mean, and so we gambled. We played the slot machines, but then we couldn't figure out how to play. And so we gave up after and we lost $5. But it's like I could write that scene now. I could put it in, but I can't because it's done. But you know what I mean? Like a book is hard because it's like done, but it's not done, especially with nonfiction. Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely. And I feel like this book felt so of the moment, right? Like there were scenes at the end that took place in 2022. Like I think they were, yeah, time-stamped 2022. Like it felt very current. The commentary felt very current. It felt like what is still going on. That is a beautiful addendum. And your mom is such a star. Like I was so moved by the story. I know that Kerri had a couple of questions sort of in that vein. I'm gonna pass to her.
I don't even know if I had a coherent question, just like that. I love your mom. And like that, I feel like so many people write, you know, memoirs and things where it's like a traumatic experience with family, which like there is some of that in your book as well, obviously. But I think just the way that you wrote about your mother was so beautiful, and I was very touched by it. And I read another interview that you did where you said that she hadn't read it yet, but that you was it the audiobook or she was going to be listening to has since that interview has she listened to it or what did she think of it?
I mean, I think she really likes the book. I think it's kind of funny because like she sort of went on tour with me or for part of it. So she came to Seattle when it launched at Elliott Bay, and then she came to my Atlantic City event as well. And she was kind of my conversation partner of sorts for both of those. And she said that she's a fan of the book, but she's also kind of like, I already know everything. Like she's just like, it's true. I mean, it was my life. So she's like, oh, nothing surprised me. Which I thought was kind of funny because I'm like, well, yeah, it's not meant to surprise you because it's like it's everything, but I think she just was I think most of all she thought it was funny, which I was surprised. I think that was her first response was like, oh my gosh, like that was so funny, like, with me and like just like, cutting the fruit and like waving the fruit around, or that scene where she gets kind of like free bread from like this guy who had a crush on her back when she was a teenager. She's just like, ah ha ha, like I got that free bread. Like she just thought it was amusing, like she just was amused by the book, which is really special. I think it's very sweet that, I'm very lucky to have her. She's what a force, but also just kind of like, I think a lot of people have these like stereotypical ideas as to what an Asian American mom is like, the tiger mom. You've heard all these like stories and news stories about the tiger mom. And I think that my mom is like so like some other mythical creature that's like, so supportive of me. And even if she doesn't fully understand like my poetry, she didn't really read it, but she really was supportive of me the whole time. I will say that she did tell stories when I was on tour with her about how I didn't know this actually, but when I was a baby, like before I could even really talk, or definitely couldn't read, but she said that whenever she put me in the cart at the grocery store, I would reach my hand out for anything that was like a magazine or a book or anything like that. She just said that I wanted it before I didn't even know what it was. And so she told me, she was like, I already knew, like even when you couldn't even talk, that you wanted books, like, and she thought it was so weird. But she was like, I guess this is the way it will be. But yeah, she's a big star of the book, and I really, really wanted her to be the focal point in many ways, because it's a memoir by me, but it's really her. And I think the best part of it all is when she was on tour with me, she started to sign books. And that was like, it was like natural. She just started to pick up a pen and sign. And people were so delighted because she basically wrote it, because she wrote me, if that's so cheesy, but it's the truth. It's the truth.
That's so
No, this is like
sweet.
making me cry.
I know it's emotional, but I mean, it's so cute because she signs it in her in Chinese, and then she writes "I love you." Isn't that cute? So
That's so
whoever has a signed copy from my mom, you're very lucky. There's only
I
probably
want one.
20. There's only
I know,
20
I'm
out
so
there.
jealous.
That book anecdote is so cute too, about in the grocery store. And it makes sense that you wrote in the book about how you worked in the library as a
Yeah,
teenager, and
I
I
did.
worked at that library as an adult, so
So
I
wild to
I
me.
enjoyed seeing that in the
Monmouth
book.
County.
I know that library.
Yep, yep, yep,
Is it the one
yep.
in Manalapan? No.
Uh,
Mm-mm.
East
Mine's Eastern
Eastern.
Branch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I worked all over, but I was at Eastern Branch on like Sundays. Sometimes I covered there. I was mostly at headquarters, but all the
Mm.
same thing ultimately. um,
I had a question about the audiobook.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so my like medium baggage is that I love to have the book in paper and have the book on audio if the author
Oh.
is reading it. Um, so Jane, you've been my companion reading this. Like I would go back and forth, like, and then I would hear something, like I would be listening to you read while I drive. And I think like maybe in the first chapter, you described mahjong tiles
Mm-hmm.
as a porcelain earthquake, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And my jaw dropped, and I was like, okay, I need to be like, there were like too many times that I like had to go back to the book and just like make little marks. Um, so yeah, so I like had this great hybrid experience of reading on paper, but also listening to you read. Um, and the audiobook is so great, and you did a great job with it. I'm
Yeah.
curious to know what the experience of recording your own audiobook is like. Like that just seems like such a wild process. And I'm curious to hear what that was like for you, especially, I mean, I'm very moved by the fact that like that's how your mom got to experience it too, is by listening to the
Mhm.
audiobook. Like that's super special. So would love to hear
Yeah,
any of your audio
thanks.
experience.
Thanks, Courtney. I really appreciate that because like I almost didn't do it. Yeah, like the company who kind of bought the audio rights was like, "Oh, well, we're going to hire someone." Like, and I was like, "Can I audition?" They were like, "No, we don't have time. Let's hire someone." And I was like, "Okay, that makes sense." And so they sent me two audition tapes. And it was just not the right voice. They both were Mandarin speakers of like, which is, I'm Toisanese Cantonese. And so I was like, hmm. And then there were like, there was just moment I just felt I really wanted to narrate it. But it was like such a small window. And finally I convinced them for a few reasons. But I remember I had to basically jump into the studio like pretty much the next day. It felt really fast, like super fast. And I recorded the book in like I think like 5 days or something like that. Maybe it was four, I'm not sure, but it was basically 9 to 5 with a lunch break. Funny enough, with the recording, I eat a lot of snacks. Like anyone who knows me, like I'm eating at all times. Like I don't like eat them 3 meals a day kind of situation. Like if I had my way, I would just eat at all like hours a little bit of everything all the time. And so I would get hungry and I would growl, my stomach would growl like and you can't the tape picks it up. And so, oh my gosh, like it was so hard. It was like, do we put a pillow on her stomach? Do we feed her nuts? Like it was just like funny because like, okay, that's the silly part of the recording that I didn't know that my stomach would growl pretty much all day long because I had just lunch at like noon. That's basically when because you're in the box. You're basically in a box for that whole day minus lunch. And so I was just hungry all the time. Anyway, that's just me like in my snack obsession. But recording it was really powerful to me. I've never done any recording work before. I do perform as a poet, I guess, so I maybe have some practice reading, but I've never read prose out loud ever, really. I will also say that it was really vulnerable to voice out loud some of the sections that were pretty intense, I think, especially with like estrangement and with domestic violence in particular. But shockingly, the hardest chapter I thought, and the one I'm most proud of, which is called The Object of Love, that one I barely had any stops, like in terms of, sometimes you have to go back and reread. That one was so fluid. And I was so afraid to read that chapter. Like I had been like worried all night. I couldn't sleep when I knew that chapter was coming the next day. But it was the smoothest one. And I felt like a huge catharsis. Like I felt so good after when I read that chapter. Like it was like same thing with the to love a mosquito and when my brother and my father's relationship, that one was a hard one to I thought it was going to be hard to read, but it was the smoothest one. Anything that was actually the hardest emotionally was the easiest to read. That sounds so weird, but it was like catharsis. And I will say, here's a funny story. One last story about the audiobook was like there's this chapter where I like talk about my Chinese name, which I'm gonna say because I have to remember like it all the time now. Su Hearn. I said it. I said it. But I forgot how to say it on the day of recording. So I called my mom in the studio when I was in the studio and she was at work. And I was like, Mommy, I need you to say my name so I can like say it in the recording. She was like, you forgot it again. And I was like, I did. Anyway, it was funny because like the producers were laughing and I had them record it. So we had to play it back a few times so I would remember how I say it. Because Cantonese has 6 tones. So it was like really hard to get right. Which I butchered probably a lot of the Cantonese Toisanese in the book, but whatever, I admit to it. So in the book, I'm like, I don't know how to speak it. So anyway, it was funny. But thanks for listening to the audiobook. It was like I've never worked that hard on one, well, besides writing the book. It was like intense. It was like every day just in this little studio. And I was so hungry. I just will never forget. growing.
I would just never think about that. Like the fact that the microphone picks it up. I'm like a big seltzer drinker. So honestly, like I'm quaking at the thought of a microphone picking up like anything going
Any
on.
sounds they made. I wear earrings every day. I love earrings. I love jewelry, anything. They were like, take everything off. Like, don't wear like a plain. I also like to dress like up there, like wear something that's not going to even make any sounds. Like it was like a very, even the hair I had to pull up and so it wouldn't swish around. Like it was so, I didn't think about these things, but yep.
Oh my
Hmm.
God. Thank you for this insight. I was so curious. But it was a wonderful audiobook. I highly recommend anyone who is here or will be watching this later on YouTube. If you haven't yet, I highly recommend the audio. It was a great companion.
Thanks. I almost didn't do it, so it really means a lot that you said. I'm really proud of the audiobook too. I am. Yeah. I personally can't listen to it. It's like, how everybody has that thing where you can't listen to yourself on the answering machine or whatever. But
Yes. Yes. But
I
everybody else,
love
they do.
I didn't listen to it, but now I want to. But I love when memoirs in particular are like read by the person who wrote them. I
Mhm.
almost feel like it shouldn't be allowed to have an actor record a memoir. Like we should make the people if they want to, but it's just
Me
it adds such another level of like it's
does,
so
yeah.
much more personal and it's just that was so fascinating what you said about how like the ones that were the hardest for you to write were so easy for you to say out loud. There's
Mhm.
something interesting going on there.
There is definitely. I would never have guessed that. Never. Mm-mm.
And then the food, the being hungry thing makes me think about how hungry I was reading this book at times because there's a lot of food in the book as well.
Yeah.
Um, do you like to cook? I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this question.
Oh my
I
God.
wrote something about food on my notes. That's what.
I love that. I actually kind of like that question because it's kind of hard to answer. I am better at eating than I am at cooking. I'll just say that. I am learning to cook finally. Sort of like pandemic kind of pushed that into existence even more so because I just missed some of the food that I wasn't able to get as readily. Just a lot of heritage foods. So I've been learning how to make mostly a lot of soups, like juk, of course, but also I've been making bao and tomato and egg and just a bunch of like yeah, dumplings and just like comfort food, I guess, from my childhood because I miss it. But yeah, I'll be honest, like it's not as natural to me. It's probably because my mom, like, I think when I was growing up, I mean, I grew up in a restaurant, and so the book kind of takes place also in the restaurant that my father basically gambled away. But even after the restaurant was gone, like my mom is so amazing at cooking. She like heals people through food. And in many ways, I feel kind of like she was trying to push me out of the kitchen. She was always just like, it's also hard. Like that labor is really intense, I think, to kind of be in a restaurant and like the hours. And it's just so rough for anyone who's ever like worked service. It's a lot. And so my mom was just like, no, 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 just like drop her off the light. They basically dropped me off at the library during the restaurant days and so I never got to learn her recipes or learn from her. But even now, if I go back and I'm just kind of like, she's just like, stop being creepy. She's just like, stop watching, it's creepy. And I'm like, well, I want to learn how to cook. And so it's funny. She's funny because she doesn't actually want, you would think she would want to pass it down, I guess. But she's just like, well, if you learn how to make it, then I don't get to baby you. There's that kind of vibe going on. But she's like, I need you to. So I've tried to make tomato and egg, and it's not the same as her version. And so I texted her a picture just recently of my dish, and she was just kind of like, oh, that doesn't look right. I guess you just have to wait until you come home and I'll make it for you. Like, so I don't know if I'm gonna learn, to be honest, unless I really am creepy and I'll just continue to just be like creepy. Um, but she usually shoos me away, but I'm just like a little squirrel just trying to watch her. But yeah, I don't know if I can really be the same like level as my mom. Same thing goes with gardening or anything she really does, I've been making this terrible joke about being like the knockoff brand cereal version of her, but I feel very much like I'm trying so hard to like be her, and it's not quite working out. But it's okay at the same time. I'm just like, at least I look like her. So there's that. But yeah, there's a lot of food in here. It drives a big part of me and who I am. And I am perpetually like thinking about food. Like if I know I've found my people when we're eating dinner together and we're thinking about what we're going to eat the next day. We're going to talk about, hey, what we're going to eat for lunch, or like, oh, like wouldn't this be nice to eat at some other time? Like we're always talking about eating the next meal. That's when I know I found my friends. It's like that's the best. That's the best feeling. People who enjoy that nourishment as much as you do. That's so special. I feel like you're nodding some like, okay, well, we need to eat together.
Yeah,
That is
absolutely.
heavy cosign. I
Yeah.
feel like there's this like weird national conversation, or maybe I'm just like in the wrong corner of TikTok. People talking about food chatter. Have you guys heard about this?
No, I don't
Not
know
on
what this is.
TikTok.
It's a nightmare. Now I like regret saying it because maybe your TikToks are going to start serving it to you. But I think that it's like part of this like Ozempic kind of larger conversation. And they're like, I started taking Ozempic and now it's neutralized food chatter. And I'm like, I don't live a life without food chatter. Like I want to be talking about
Oh,
like,
like you stop thinking about food?
yeah, like, oh, I used to
That's
like think about what I was going to eat for my next meal before this meal was even done. And I'm like, that's a joy. That's the joy of
yeah,
being alive. Like,
exactly.
I have dinner reservations with my friends at the end of the week, and like, we've all picked out exactly what we're going to get for every course by
Mhm.
Monday. Like, we've all
Yeah.
looked at the menu already. We all like know what's going to happen. So anyway, I'm with you. My favorite kinds of people are the kinds of people who love to eat. So,
Yes, exactly. Because it's
yeah.
also community. I mean, that's basically what eating is in many ways, at least my understanding of it and my family too, is like it's meant to connect. And this is when we talk to each other, when we laugh and share stories and write poetry, I guess. Like that's happens when we eat. Yeah. I cannot write without snacks. Like it's important to me that I always have about like 6 bowls. They're specifically in bowls for some reason, like little moons. I set it up where there's just like food around me and books, like as I write. Now, you should not look at my laptop right now, but it's like covered always in like food stains.
So is mine, but like my setup is nowhere near as romantic. I like the thought of the like tiny bowls in orbit around me. Just like what's
It's only because that's all I can make as a new ceramicist, is that like I can only make small things.
okay. Yes, I do. I still want to come back on ceramics. I had one more question. I know that we have like I think Kerri and I like to delve into our like fun questions, which is like mostly about New
Yeah.
Jersey centric things. Before we get into those, I had one more question about just sort of like process
Mhm.
related. Um, I was curious about how you approached the format and the structure of your
Mhm.
memoir. I know that, or I believe that some of at least some of the chapters had been previously published.
Yep.
So I was curious how you decided what should go in here, how like the sections came to be structured, the wongmom.com sections that like had their own special border on them. Just how that format came to be.
Yeah, thanks for that question about process. I'm a super nerd about form and process. When I first sold the book, it was like the first 90 pages or so I had, it was essays. It was just essays. And so I think when Tin House where it was like, oh, like we want to have it as a memoir, I was like, I don't know how to put it together. I worked really closely with my editor, Elizabeth DeMio, on kind of like braiding and connecting already published pieces with newer pieces too. And I'm okay. I mean, I think a lot about how the structure of form is going to always mirror the emotional weight of what's happening. And for me, like I had to write in a non-linear way. Like that's how migration works. You know, it's like things don't always go forward. They kind of go back. It's the experience of kind of almost like, you know, being haunted or holding this history from, you know, like because the book also talks a little bit about the Great Leap Forward too and the Cultural Revolution. And there's a lot in the book. That said, I also wanted to push on the genre of memoir. I really think that memoir, I love the genre so much too, but I also was trying to think to myself, like, what is a memoir, right? And we think it's tied to memory or something that's happened in the past. And that's why I went all the way up to the present as far as I can go. Um, and I created a kind of future, which is longmom.com, which is a made up character, which kind of breaks the rule of nonfiction. And if anything, I'm kind of a rule breaker. But I love her because she's a made up character in a book. She's my mom who lives in the internet to give you life advice. And I really got inspired by my friend who, you know, my mom gave him advice on a bus, like whatever, however many years ago, and it changed the direction of his life. And, you know, in many ways that I feel like I imagine, speaking of TikTok, I imagine my mom as a social media, if she had another version of her life, like a social media star who would be like giving this like insight, you know, like a mom, like sometimes we just need like a mom on the internet telling you everything's not necessarily going to be okay, but everything is going to be a mango or something. Like it's like, huh, what does that mean? Like she's like cryptic, you know? And that's my mom in real life, but I wanted to make her like ridiculous, almost like a character. And so she actually, longmom.com became the thread that wove, I think, a lot of the singular essays, and became almost like this present future time where I would be writing the memoir and she would help me out and I would reflect on where I'm at in my life right now. And so it was a really cool way to bring in the different senses of time, I think, in the book, and a lot of humor. I think honestly, the structure in addition had a lot to do with texture in terms of like tonal structure. So like I hope the book, in my hope for you all, like in terms of the readers of the book, is that it's gonna like make you cry, ugly cry, but also like make you laugh a lot because it's kind of ridiculous, some of those moments. Um, like literally the end of The Object of Love, which is a tough chapter. My mom says, you know, I'll be your boyfriend forever, but no sexy stuff. Like that's hilarious. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. But it needed to end that chapter because it was a heartbreaking chapter. And so I worked really hard on those tonal shifts and the structure to create this feeling that reflects real life, which is a bit like I'm not gonna write from beginning to end. I'm not gonna write where like, oh, now she learned a lesson. Like that's not how it works in life. And so I couldn't write that memoir. It's not the memoir that I'm gonna give you, but you know, maybe other people will. But I certainly knew I needed to take some risks and have fun. Like there is a writer here, there's a real person, and I didn't want to re-trigger myself or harm myself when I was like writing the book. And so I needed humor and I needed playfulness in the structure to keep me safe actually as I was writing. And I really want to emphasize that for anyone who's a writer is that like you know your boundaries and in terms of what you're expressing, and sometimes craft and art can help you kind of I guess like do that in a way that feels good and feels safe, I suppose too. But thanks for that. Yeah, it's been a journey, I think. And it definitely was not planned from the beginning. It was like a last minute, like freaking out with my editor, like, what am I gonna do? And it came to me. But she's also gonna exist. Like I did the website's like being made right now. Um, and if anyone has nostalgia, it's like old school AOL instant messenger style. It's just a hilarious looking website that I'm working with my friend on.
That sounds so cool. I can't wait to see that.
It's gonna be fun.
That's awesome. Courtney, did you have anything else before we do our silly New Jersey questions? They're not that silly, but our New Jersey.
No, I'm good. Let's get into New Jersey.
Okay.
Okay.
So my first New Jersey related question, for you is, so when you come back here, what are some things that you always make sure you make time for?
Oh, that's such a sweet question. Um, I mean, the first thing that I always do is I have to go to the beach. Like I have to go to the shore. My mom and I always go around 4 p.m., like kind of like later in the day. I think it's a little cooler and we just love to walk. The one that we go to is Seabright. It's the closest one from us, I think. It's pretty chill. It's like a chill beach. It's very quiet. And again, if we go later, sometimes we'll go anywhere between 4 to 7 p.m. And we'll just like walk. We'll walk. And in fact, I'm the one who gets like is a giant baby. And I'm like, whoa, let's go back. I'm tired. My mom's like, no, we're going to that. She'll like see a rock or whatever. But then when we get there, she'll push me to the next one. And she'll also be like, foot race. And I'm like, wait, what? And she'll be like, so I have to, that's my number one thing. I go to the shore. Like almost if I could go every day, no matter what the weather is like. My mom will go to the beach with me. So it's like that's like number one thing that I have to go to. And then we always get pizza. I mean, that's obviously like a Jersey slice in particular. We go to Pete and Elda's, Carmen's Pizzeria. I think those are the three names. I got it all. It's like always like so many names in there. But I've been going since I was like a teenager. So you know how it is. It's nostalgic. You go back to the place that you always go to. And you always order the extra large pie. Which is massive, but it's also thin pizza, so it's like not that big actually. But I almost ate a whole one because I think you get a t-shirt or something, but I couldn't quite make it, I think. I was so close. I just remember distinctly as a teenager. I think I was one slice away from finishing it and getting a t-shirt, but I couldn't do it. Shame.
Yeah, I did it as a teenager, and I think I had to sneak some crusts to one of my friends because there was no way I was gonna finish it. So I've cheated a little bit, but I still have the shirt because the pizzas are like an extra large, but so are the t-shirts that they give you. So it's still this like massive shirt that I can wear now, and it looks a little less ridiculous on me than it did when I was
I'm jealous. I want that shirt so bad.
Do they still do it?
I think they do. I think they still like change the designs all the time and they're like crazy. The one I have is like Halloween themed and they definitely just stole a bunch of artwork that they did not have the rights to and it's incredible.
I know what I'm
never
doing.
been. I need to go.
You've never been?
I literally live down the street now and I've never been. I was telling my husband about this last week.
You gotta
like,
go.
we need to go to Pete and Elda's. Like it was such a rite of passage when I was a teenager and it eluded me. And like now I can like spit and hit it. Like we have to go.
You
So
have to go. I need this t-shirt still. There's still time. There's still time, you know?
we'll sneak it across. I'll mail you a t-shirt. It'll be great.
Oh my God.
I'm like trying to Kerri, I just feel like your version of that question was like all of my splintery Jersey questions, but like very sweetly, nicely worded. Atlantic City, when I started reading this memoir, was obviously at the top of my mind because of the title. And there's some, early, dark, vividly depicted scene work specific to Atlantic City. But then throughout the rest of the book, there's references, obviously, to other parts of New Jersey. And I thought maybe it was just because, like, I'm from Monmouth County that I kept hearing, like, my ears kept perking up that I was like, ooh, Stone Pony. Ooh, Marlboro. I grew up in Marlboro. So I'm like, and it like, ooh, Madawan. So I was curious, like, when you think back to New Jersey as this like place of origin, which place or which places really stand out to you the most?
That's a hard one because I think all these places that you're naming have distinct memories tied to them. A lot of people just assume that the restaurant was in Atlantic City just because of the title and I mean it makes sense, but no, it was like that's a pretty big drive actually. The restaurant was in the Shrewsbury Plaza, so it was like really close to the Monmouth County Eastern Library branch, which is where my mom dropped me off. Sometimes like 6 hours, like she would just like be like, go ahead, free babysitting. Back in the 80s, you would just like drop off children places. But I think that I think like the place that I have the most like intense I think like connection to, or like the most vivid, will have to be my grandparents' place in Mattawan. And my grandparents are no longer in this world, unfortunately. But that particular house, it was a split level house. It was like half, like literally half of it. We only had half of it. And that's where I was like, that's where it was my first like, well, the restaurant was kind of my home, but like we slept in the attic. And it was like all my aunts and uncles, like everyone lived in that house. And there's just something very distinctive about the garden in the back. And just like my grandma had tried to like plant all these Chinese vegetables, and there was a Dunkin' Donuts right around the way. And I mentioned it in the book too, but she was a local Dunkin' Donuts celebrity. They would always take a picture of her, Polaroid of her, and my grandfather too. But there was a whole wall of just my grandparents. It was so sweet. They couldn't speak any English at all. They could say in Cantonese, coffee is gafe. So it sounds really familiar if it's like close, and they'll be like gafe, and they'll like coffee, like okay. And so like they'd always get the free cup of coffee. It was so sweet. But yeah, just like honestly, anytime I'm like around the strip mall, I get kind of like I get really nostalgic. Like I just get like really emotional if I'm like in a strip mall in Jersey. It doesn't matter honestly where it is exactly sometimes, but like there's something about strip malls that always gets me. I don't know. But Madeline, I think is very has a like deep rooted kind of like, maybe it's because like where I actually like live, like from the earliest baby days, right? Um I just yeah, that's yeah, Madeline. Mm-hmm.
I love Mattawan. I worked in Mattawan Library briefly too. That's a nice library. And that's so funny. Shrewsbury Plaza, that's like right around the corner from where my like where I lived growing up. I've like absolutely been to that restaurant. Like,
That's hilarious.
yeah,
I'm sure you have. I mean,
yeah, no, I definitely have. That's so funny. I don't
there's
know why
just
I
another
never
family
thought
there.
to, when I was reading the book, I didn't even think to like ask or like wonder where it was exactly, but it's like probably the closest one to where I grew up.
You totally have come in there then, because we didn't have that. There weren't many Chinese restaurants around us or in that area. There was a China buffet across the street. I think that I remember my mom being like, "Oh no, they have unlimited crab. What are we gonna do? Like, they're gonna take us out of business." But I mean, you know how restaurant life is. You have your customers. Like people
Yeah.
are dedicated to you. And I had one customer who like put me in his will. He didn't have any kids. And
Wow.
he put me and my brother in his will, and we were supposed to get $50 Toys R Us gift certificates every year until we turned 18.
That's so sweet.
Mm-hmm. Isn't
Wow.
that so sweet? It's so
Yeah.
sweet. And he passed, and his wife like did this. And it was we got to know her very well. It was very sweet.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
I'm
that's amazing.
crying again. Like that's so emotional.
It's so emotional. And it was I remember distinctly, it was my first funeral. I've never been to a funeral before then. I was very young. And I just distinctly being like, oh my God, I didn't understand. I mean, I was old enough to understand he was gone, but I was like, I was also confused, like, like, but yeah, I just remember it being like, because he'd always bring me a book. That was the other thing, like that particular customer brought me a book every time he came, every time. And so that was very sweet. He knew that I loved to read. And we were in his will. How sweet is that? So customers, like truly, I'll go back and people will be like, oh my God, it's like Jane, like Jin's daughter. I'm like, they're like, you grew up. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm almost 40. Surprise. I'm not 4 years old yet. Oh, so
Wow,
cute.
that's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what time is it? Okay, we have a couple minutes. I'm gonna make it so that the audience can unmute themselves. Allow to unmute. Okay. So if anyone has any questions, you can either put it in the chat, you can unmute yourself. If not, Courtney and I will ask another question. But
I of course have more. I of course have more questions, but anyone who wants to jump in, you're absolutely welcome to.
I have a question. Um, is there anything that didn't make it into this book? Like, would you consider writing another memoir? Is there anything you didn't get to include or like didn't fit in with the narrative?
Mm, Oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful question. I like, yes, so much didn't go in here. Actually, it's like when you're writing something, there's probably more that didn't go in than maybe sometimes the whole book itself. That's at least my process. I tend to overwrite in order to make sure that I have all the pieces that I need to. Um, I probably even some of these stories I'm telling you all right now, like there's so many stories, there's so many little bits and pieces. I will say though, it was emotionally a lot to write this memoir. I think that I don't know if I have another memoir in me. I think it would take, or I would say maybe way later in life, but not anytime soon because it was so intense. And to be honest, now I made a joke at the beginning about like, sometimes memoirists kind of writing fiction and like turning things that have happened to them a little more speculative or into the fictional world. It's kind of more where I'm feeling these days. Is like if I'm gonna go prose, I might try fiction and see what happens, but I'll always write poetry. But there's so much that didn't go in here. I can't even begin to like share what didn't make it. But I remember I was working on this one chapter, particularly about uh, like I can't swim and I have a fear of water on my face, which is funny because like I grew up on the shore and I almost drowned. And that was going to be something about like this idea of fear and like I was going to write this whole chapter on fear and but then I was like, wait, didn't I write my second book of poems about fear? It's called How to Not Be Afraid of Everything. So I was like, is this like repeating myself? But anyway, there was a whole chapter. I started it. It was probably 10 pages in and I just scrapped it. Not scrapped it because I'm sure it'll be composted. But there's a lot that didn't make it, unfortunately. But yeah, I don't know if I have it in me, at least for a good 10 years. I don't know. I'll write little nonfiction essays maybe, but not a memoir. I just can't. Like, that was a lot. I've been working on this since I think 2016, 2017. I'm bad at math, but like 5-ish years or so. But it was like, I don't know if a lot of people even knew I was writing this. They thought I was writing poems, but anyway, I don't know. I don't know if I could do it. It was hard. Writing's hard, everyone. But also not because it's like you're drawn to it. It's like when you have the tools, but I think it can, if you feel like it's hard emotionally, I think I need to take a big break or breath away from nonfiction memoir in particular. I am amazed when other like writers like Melissa Febos is able to like write multiple memoirs. I'm like in awe. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, we're certainly going to start using composting instead of scrapping writing. We're going to say that the writing is going to be composted. That was amazing. That has to enter the writerly lexicon.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a file called compost in my Word doc. It's just everything that just never made it into anything. It's very long. It's probably 100 pages.
Oh,
And if
wow.
I'm ever stuck on something, I will literally go to the compost pile and grab random lines and just
That's
start.
really cool.
Yeah. So you don't have to ever start from a blank page. Mm-mm.
I love that. I have like a graveyard document inevitably for like any project that I'm working on, but compost sounds so much more hopeful and generative. So I need to pivot my thinking. Um, I want to give anyone else a chance to ask a question if they want to. I also have like a couple of more like general recommendation quandaries in the meantime. Is there anyone in terms of writers, artists, other kinds of media like movies or books or TV that are like Jersey specific that speak to you, that you recommend, that stand out to you? And if not
Mm.
specifically from New Jersey, just any, writers that you're into, books you're into right now.
That's such a good question. I've been watching so much TV. I didn't even like, I was just like, what has taken place in Jersey, especially TV? I don't know what it is, but I've been like on the TV kick. I mean, which is also still writing, right? I think Rami takes place in New Jersey. Um, that's a very well-written show. I'm pretty sure that takes place in Jersey.
Yeah, Patterson.
Hmm.
Well, he's from Patterson. I don't know if the show takes place there, but yes.
Yeah. Whenever I see Jersey like in a like a series or something like that, I'm always just kind of like, oh my God, because there was always they always take place in New York or something like that, or like close by. Um, yeah, I'm so bad at like my brain starts to like whenever I have to list things, I'm just like, oh no. If you say things, maybe I will remember.
I'm trying to think I'm trying to think about like answers that we have gotten in the past in terms of TV. I feel like we've had obviously like a few robust Sopranos conversations on here before. We've obviously covered like a bunch of great Jersey authors that we've spoken to here. But yeah, we're always looking to kind of like expand our repertoire and see if there's like anyone who we're missing. Just love to like stumble across other artists, writers, anything from New Jersey. We love a good Jersey depiction.
One of my friends, Ben Perkett, has a novel out right now called The Men Can't Be Saved. And we met so he's from Jersey, and we met at the New Jersey Governor School of the Arts, which is basically nerd camp. It was a free program like across the state. I don't know if it still exists or not, but it was held at TCNJ, that campus, and it was like I think it was 4 weeks, and it was a bunch of artists, young artists, high schoolers from across the state. And I think I mentioned it a bit in the book too, but yeah, a bunch of us kind of got together and we're just like writing. It was so magical. It was, I mean, there was only like maybe one or two problematic people maybe as part of that cohort, but I was good friends with Ben. Ben's also a poet. And so there's more with poetry and prose, but his book just came out. It's exciting. He's awesome. He's a Jersey. I think
didn't realize he was from Jersey. I've seen the book.
I've definitely seen this cover.
It's
Yeah.
like a memorable cover. Yeah.
That's cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, we were teenagers. We were so young. Oh my gosh. And we were just like trying to write. And it was, I mean, it's so amazing. I think we might be there's maybe one or two other people from that cohort, but it was who are still writing and publishing. But yeah, we go way back. We go way back, like 16 years old, way back. But anyway, yeah, Jersey. There you go.
That's a great one. I would never know that he's from Jersey. So thank you for putting him on our radar.
Yeah, shout out to Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I guess unless anyone has anything else quickly, I think we're just about time. So I want to thank you again, Jane, for spending this time with us. Really appreciate it. For anybody who's listening who maybe hasn't picked up the book yet, please do. And I think Courtney argued pretty well for the audiobook as well.
Audio and paper. I'm sorry, like
yeah, both.
Definitely one of the two, but like why not both?
Maximalism. I'm so into it.
But yeah, I mean, we didn't like go too detailed into like the themes of the book and what the book's about, but it's amazing. It's funny, it's heartbreaking, it's vulnerable, it's smart, it will make you angry, it'll make you hungry, it'll make you happy. You did so much with the space that you had, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure anybody listening will enjoy it as well. So
oh, thanks. That means a lot. And especially, I mean, it's it's a book that also is like always thinking about home. And I mean, the book takes place also in Seattle, where I live, but also Hong Kong and Iowa and like all the places I've lived, Montana. But I always come back to Jersey. Like it's always there. Like it's like no matter where I live, where I travel, where I am in my kind of new home of sorts, but at the center of it, it's my mom is in Jersey. And so like I'm always home. I'm always home. So I think that says something too. I think that it is a book that says that you carry Jersey with you wherever you go. It's not like you don't have to, you can be there literally and live there your whole life. However, if you do move elsewhere, you're always it's kind of cheesy, but you you carry that whatever, that Jersey spirit. It's so silly, but I can tell. I can, if I meet someone in Seattle from Jersey, it's like, I mean, it's obvious.
That's so funny.
I love when that happens.
Did you want to plug your Jersey events at all? Because
Yes,
yeah, because you had a few coming up.
yes, I feel like I want to make sure I get the dates right. I'm gonna pull up my calendar. I think it's so soon. But yes, I'll be in Jersey next week, and it'll be on not next week, the week after. I'm bad at time. But I'll be at Stockton University on the 27th, which is exciting, the Atlantic City campus. And on the 28th, I'll be at Warren Community College there too. So I'll be in Jersey those 2 days, 27th, 28th, and you may see me strolling the beach around those dates. So that's true, or maybe I'm gonna still try to get that pizza t-shirt from Pete and Elda's. I mean, and now I feel like I have to, and I'm up for a challenge. You know, I need to eat this pizza. I can do this. I believe it. I might be stronger now than I was then.
I was gonna say maybe it'll be easier than when you were. You said you were a teenager when you tried
I
to
was
do
a teenager. I think
Yeah.
it's a rite of passage when you're a teenager.
Yeah, I think it is.
I know. But then again, when I was a teenager, I was literally like a garbage like heap. Like I would eat so much. So I don't know. I don't know if I have more power now or not. I guess I have to just
One
try.
way to find out, yeah.
I have to try. I have to try. And at the very least, they can give me a pity t-shirt, maybe. Yeah.
I found this recently. Do I have it in arm's reach? Okay. I went to Point Pleasant and I spent $30 trying to win.
Oh my God.
Stop it.
Okay, but I couldn't get it. I lost $40 trying to get him with a claw. And then I went to go find, like, they had him, you could win him by throwing darts at balloons. And I went up to the carnival barker and I was like, level with me. Like, how many darts do I need to, like, what do I need to do to get the seagull? And he was like trying to do like rough estimates. And he's like, look, there's a gift shop next door and they sell him. It's a sure thing. You should just go. And I'm like, you're a bad carnival barker, but you're a good friend. So, and he was $40. So
it's so big.
Yeah, no,
he's
huge. He's everything to me.
He's huge. I've been literally, that's the one I want, the one with a chip in its mouth. I know exactly. I know this guy. I know this plushie. Oh my God.
This one says Point Pleasant on it. I can point you in the right direction if you're willing to go to Point Pleasant, where you can buy it as a sure thing and not waste your money on the claw. Sorry. My point is that I think that the folks at Pete and Elda's will be open to some kind of like, let me just buy that shirt off of you.
Probably.
Because I have him and he's proof.
There's always a deal to be made in New Jersey.
Yes, there's always a deal to be made at the Jersey Shore.
That's so funny. I'm glad I was still recording for that.
Oh God.
Thank you for showing me this seagull. It makes me really happy.
So thank you everyone. I guess let me put in the chat, that's our Zoom registration for our next event, which will be on October 17th. We will be talking to Rachel Harrison about her novel Black Sheep. So if anyone's interested in that, check us out on Instagram, newsletter. You can stay in touch with everything we're doing. Thank you again. I'm gonna stop recording now.
Susan said